Lieutenant Toshihiro Ōura was 27 years old when he sat in the damp, flickering light of a kerosene lamp inside a half-collapsed bunker near Munda Point on the island of New Georgia. It was the night of July 13, 1943. Outside, the jungle pulsed with the distant thunder of artillery and the occasional flash of American naval guns pounding the Japanese perimeter. Inside, the smell of mildew, sweat, and decay hung thick in the air. His men were sleeping fitfully, what remained of them. The 229th Infantry Regiment, once a proud unit of the Imperial Japanese Army, had been reduced to fragments. Food was scarce, ammunition low, and disease rampant. Yet, amid exhaustion and despair, Oura took out a notebook and began to write what would become his final entry. He was not a famous man, nor a senior officer. He was an ordinary line officer with a background in logistics and field coordination. But that background gave him a rare clarity. He had studied at the Imperial Japanese Army Academy, where he was trained in the rigid doctrines of offensive warfare that had shaped Japan's early victories in China and Southeast Asia. By 1943, however, those doctrines were collapsing under the realities of a new kind of war, one that Japan had not prepared to fight. What Oura wrote that night was not poetry, not a cry of despair, but an analysis, a soldier's sober, painful reckoning with why his army was losing. Oura began by describing the situation at Munda. The Americans had landed on New Georgia in late June, part of the Allied advance through the Solomon Islands, aimed at capturing the Japanese airfield at Munda Point. The Japanese had built the airstrip to extend their reach toward Guadalcanal and the southern Pacific, but now it had become a death trap. The terrain was dense jungle, the heat suffocating, and the mosquitoes carried malaria that struck down soldiers faster than bullets. The Japanese defenders were isolated. Supply lines were cut by American naval and air superiority. Every crate of ammunition, every bag of rice had to be brought by small barges that risked destruction from the sea and sky. Oura recorded that by mid-July, his men were subsisting on a handful of rice mixed with boiled jungle leaves. Wounded soldiers were left behind because stretchers and morphine were gone. "We no longer fight the enemy," he wrote. "We fight hunger, disease, and despair." But then he went deeper, beyond the immediate suffering, to what he saw as the root cause. "The Americans," he wrote, "fight with systems, not with individuals. We fight with spirit, not with systems. And spirit alone cannot carry ammunition to the front." It was a line that would later be quoted by American intelligence officers who translated his diary after the battle. In those few words, Oura captured the essence of Japan's strategic failure in the Pacific War. He noted how the American attacks came in waves, coordinated across land, sea, and air. The U.S. Navy bombarded Japanese positions at dawn. Then came aircraft strafing runs. Then ground troops advanced, guided by radio communications and supplied by a constant stream of trucks, jeeps, and landing craft. "They move like parts of one machine," Oura observed. "Each arm knows what the other does." In contrast, Japanese units often acted in isolation. Communication lines were unreliable. Commanders acted without coordination, and supplies rarely arrived where needed. "Our courage is strong," he wrote, "but our system is weak. Their courage is ordinary, but their system is strong. The result is the same. They advance, and we die." Oura was not bitter toward his comrades. He respected their bravery. He wrote with admiration of the men who crawled through mud and malaria to deliver ammunition to the front lines, and of the pilots who took off knowing they might never return. But he saw that courage had become a substitute for organization. "We are told to believe that spirit will overcome material," he wrote. But in truth, material and spirit must work together. Spirit cannot carry food across an ocean. Spirit cannot build an airfield faster than bombs destroy it. His words were heresy to the military culture of wartime Japan. The Imperial Army preached that spiritual purity and self-sacrifice were superior to Western dependence on machinery and logistics. Propaganda glorified death in battle as the highest form of loyalty. But to Oura, this was delusion. "The true duty of a soldier," he wrote, "is not to die bravely, but to make his army effective." He saw that Japan's leaders had confused valor with victory. He analyzed the supply crisis with the eye of a logistician. The Americans, he noted, had an astonishing ability to deliver supplies almost instantly. Even after losing many ships at Guadalcanal, he wrote, they replaced them within weeks. Their cargo ships arrive as if from endless factories. He contrasted that with Japan's painfully limited industrial base. The factories in Osaka and Nagoya could not match American production. And the shipping routes were constantly threatened by Allied submarines. We build one ship, they build 10. We lose one pilot, they train 20. He described how even the smallest American unit seemed to have resources beyond imagination. Their soldiers carry more food than our entire platoon, he wrote. They have machines that build roads, machines that carry water, machines that carry the wounded. We have men who carry each other until they fall. He saw that the American Army's strength came not from individual superiority, but from its ability to integrate thousands of ordinary men into an efficient whole. By contrast, Japanese operations were hampered by rigid hierarchy and poor coordination. Orders flowed down from Tokyo through layers of bureaucracy, often delayed or distorted. Commanders in the field lacked flexibility to adapt. Oura wrote of one operation where reinforcements were ordered to attack at dawn, unaware that another unit had. In his diary, he reflected on the contrast between what Japan's soldiers had been told and what they now faced. We were taught that the Western soldier is soft and afraid of death, he wrote, but they are not soft. They are methodical. They do not seek death, but they do not flee it. They fight with patience. Their courage is not loud, but it endures. He admitted that Japanese soldiers often charged bravely into hopeless situations out of duty, while Americans conserved their strength, retreating when necessary, regrouping, and returning with overwhelming power. We spend life as if it were nothing, he wrote. They spend it carefully, as if it were gold. In the end, gold outlasts fire. Oura's reflections were not just about tactics. They were about philosophy. He believed Japan's leadership had misunderstood the nature of modern war. War is not only courage, he wrote. It is method. It is science. It is the management of time, resources, and men. He admired how the Americans seemed to understand that war was an industrial process as much as a battlefield contest. They wage war with factories and engineers as much as with soldiers. In one striking passage, he described watching American aircraft attack in perfect formation. They come like a pattern in the sky, he wrote. Each knows his place, his timing, his purpose. We shoot at them wildly. They shoot as if guided by one thought. That, he said, was the essence of systematic warfare, the unity of intelligence, supply, communication, and execution. As the night wore on, Oura's tone turned reflective. He admitted that his analysis might never be read, that he might not live to see the war's end. But if someday this is found, he wrote, let it be known that not all Japanese officers were blind. Some of us saw the truth, but could not change it. he ended with a somber note of acceptance. Our defeat is not because we lacked courage. It is because we refused to learn. Those were among the last words he ever wrote. 2 weeks later, on July 29th, American forces captured Munda Point after weeks of fierce combat. The Japanese garrison was annihilated. Lieutenant Toshihiro Ōura's body was never identified, but his notebook was found among the ruins of a bunker by U.S. troops. It was translated and analyzed by military intelligence officers, who were struck by its insight. For years, the diary remained classified, not because it revealed military secrets, but because it offered such a clear and unfiltered view of Japan's internal weakness that it was considered sensitive material. When the document was finally declassified after the war, historians and analysts saw it as one of the most remarkable personal records of the Pacific conflict. It confirmed what Allied planners and post-war scholars had long concluded. Japan had entered a modern industrial war with pre-industrial assumptions. Courage, discipline, and national will, though essential, could not compensate for deficiencies in logistics, communication, and production. Oura's diary became a case study in several post-war analyses by American military theorists who sought to understand the dynamics of systemic warfare. They noted that his insights anticipated many of the principles that would later define modern military doctrine: networked communication, integrated logistics, flexible command, and the fusion of intelligence with operational planning. What Oura saw in 1943, through exhaustion, malaria, and despair, was the future of warfare. His reflections also struck a chord with Japanese scholars during the post-war Reconstruction period. In the 1950s and 1960s, as Japan rebuilt its economy into an industrial powerhouse, some historians cited Oura's diary as symbolic of the nation's transformation. From an empire built on ideology and sacrifice to a society built on systems, coordination, and efficiency. What he saw in defeat, one Japanese historian wrote, "We learned in peace." Today, Oura's words are still studied by military historians and strategists. His conclusion, that no amount of courage can compensate for flawed systems, remains deeply relevant. In modern warfare, where technology, logistics, and information dominate, the lesson endures. The strongest armies are not those with the bravest soldiers, but those with the most coherent systems. For the men who fought at Munda Point, the war was hell on earth, days of ceaseless bombardment, hunger, and rain. But within that inferno, one officer took the time to write a few pages of truth. His words cut through the noise of propaganda and the fog of war to reveal something universal. That war exposes not just the strength of armies, but the structure of nations. Lieutenant Toshihiro Ōura's final diary is more than a relic. It is a mirror reflecting the cost of denial and the price of pride. It shows that courage, while noble, is not enough, that spirit without structure leads only to ruin, and that even in the darkest hours of defeat, truth can still be written by a soldier with a pencil, sitting in a bunker, as the jungle burns around him. When American analysts read his last line, "Our defeat is not because we lacked courage, it is because we refused to learn," they understood they were reading not just the thoughts of a dying man, but the obituary of an empire.